Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Carissa Gehring, the Marketing and Education Specialist of Monroe County's Municipal Waste Management Authority. I only started this year, but I'm excited to spread the recycling knowledge and practice throughout our county. We are joined tonight by local professional recyclers to aid our discussion on the do's and don'ts of recycling. Adrian?
Yes, thank you. I want to say thank you to Carissa and Jim Lambert at the Monroe County Waste Authority for joining us and partnering with us. We have an excellent partnership here in Monroe County and Northampton County together. And so I'm Adrienne Forrest. I do community relations for Grand Central Landfill and Alliance Landfill and a number of other sites in our market area. And my primary focus with my colleagues is education around recycling and environmental topics related to our landfills. And I'm joined tonight with my colleagues, Bill Lehman and Henry Angelini. And they're going to join me tonight to discuss some very important topics around the basics of recycling. So I guess we can get started then, Carissa.
All right, so in light of America Recycles Day this past Sunday, we decided to bring together a little community discussion. Everyone knows about recycling and that is the right thing to do, but what happened in 2018 changed recycling as we know it. China proposed a waste import restriction and ban on 24 categories of scrap and recycling. In March of 2018, they implemented a 0.5% contamination standard, shifting recyclables around the globe, forcing all countries to evaluate the materials they were recycling. So where that brought us today is we have two systems of recycling, residential and commercial curbside, which is mainly single stream, putting it all into one bin, and manned recycling drop-off sites, where the materials are separated on site. The two systems are different in many ways. Our sites are less convenient, but ensures the marketability of the materials by having consumers separate the items themselves and keeping contaminants out. With curbside, it is not so easy. Even though we still deal with some contamination, our bins have a list of what can be accepted. Your curbside bin has no such list to remind you. The contamination that gets put into the bin adds to the cost of collection, sorting, and marketability. With this webinar, you can learn how to avoid these contaminations and save yourself and your community money. Bill? You might have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry if I muted you.
Yep, I think I did that myself. So yes, good evening, folks. Really appreciate the invitation, Carissa. Really great to be here, and I look forward to our discussion on some of the opportunities and issues that are coming up in the recycling industry. So really, first thing I wanted to do was talk a little bit about some market conditions. There's been never-ending fluctuation in commodity pricing. I've seen it, and I go back to the 90s, but there's always been peaks and valleys. And I can recall back in the 90s, we started with really, kind of crappy low-end price in the early part of the decade, and then corrugated got up to like record highs, $250, $260 a ton for cardboard midway through the 90s. And then just as quickly as the pricing came up, it came back down. And then, just fast forward a little bit, at the tail end of 2008, this is really during the economic crisis and really well before, China's green fence and continental sword, OCC fell again to terrible numbers. And folks, back then, it really wasn't just about price. It was about movement as well. We were concerned that the material we were bringing in from our customers, we wouldn't be able to move to an end market. And at that time, I actually spent a good deal of time working with commercial and industrial real estate people that were able to, show us some warehousing in and around the Newark and Elizabeth, New Jersey area. Now, thankfully, we really never got to that point, but I think that's really an area we would never want to approach, not being able to move material away from the processing centers to a mill that can turn it into new product. And now just a little more recently, since 2012, when China started to push back on quality, we've seen more highs and lows. And actually, right now, presently, we're in a fairly decent commodity market, at least for cardboard, even for mixed paper grades. Now, what we all expected, you folks may notice, may not, but effective January 1st, 2021, that is China's ultimate ban on taking any grade of recycling into the country. So, of course, if you wanted to get your material to China by January 1st, 2021, you had to get that vessel of your recyclables on the water, the slow boat to China. You had to do that by the beginning of October, because it literally takes 2.5, 3 months to get the material there. So in October, we really expected a downward decline due to China's ban, which really it actually never occurred. A lot of that is due to, India and other Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, like Taiwan. And then again, I think Robert mentioned this just earlier, our own mills, US mills that have been dormant, coming back online, and new mills opening up to make new corrugated boxes. I think that's what I heard Robert say, right? So we can have plenty of boxes for, Amazon, Walmart, Target, and with the holiday season approaching here, for all these goods and items that we're buying, they need a box to put it in, right? So I think that's very accurate, Robert. That's exactly what's going on now. And our folks, we have a marketing team up in Buffalo. They're really the experts. They'll give you a month or 2 months out, and they're saying we're going to be solid through the end of the year. But as we get into January next year, it's anybody's guess. So that kind of remains to be seen. I guess my whole point is, in general, we've always had tremendous swings and ebbs and flows in commodity pricing. So for us here at Waste Management, and really the entire industry, it's not unique to us, we've learned to, how to adjust. I mean, we've learned to adapt to, changing market conditions by strengthening our relationships with mill buyers, both domestically and on the export markets. And honestly, even before China started pushing back, we always did a very good job at that. We always sold a lot of material into India, into Southeast Asia, into Europe, and into South America. So we never put all our eggs in one basket. And certainly when you look at the export mills, they get a lot of, the domestic mills, they get a lot of our material as well. And along the way, we've also invested in new technologies, right, to ensure that we're shipping the very best quality material that we can. And that also helps us improve on our efficiencies, which helps us lower our processing costs, with the thought of passing back that savings onto our consumer base, our customers. So bottom line, it's really all about the quality. And that's why, Henry and I are delighted, Adrian, to be on a call like this, where we can talk about some of the issues, contamination. I mean, there's really a concerted effort from folks like you, and focus and effort out there to improve the quality of the recycling. The cleaner the material comes in, the cleaner it goes out, the more opportunities we'll have it to sell it to mills and at the best pricing. So we really appreciate being on the call. Consumers rely on material that the industry collects and process. And we saw that during the very early part of COVID back in the spring, we saw there was a pretty dramatic shortage of paper towels and tissue. in supermarkets. I think most of you probably went out and saw the empty shelves, right? And I think that was kind of twofold. Folks were flocking to supermarkets, kind of hoarding or buying up all the paper towels and tissues they could. And secondly, tissue mills really weren't geared to or transitioning to make a residential or home style paper towel or tissue. Tissue mills generally make X amount for the commercial sector, an office building, a factory where they have public restrooms. That tissue is different, right? It's a different color normally. It comes in a different packaging. It's a different product from what we see at home. So tissue mills had to transition from making a commercial product to making a more residential home product because everybody was now working at home. And the final piece of that is, office paper. With people not working in office paper and office buildings, they weren't generating office paper, which is the major component to make tissue. Paper towels and paper napkins and toilet tissue. So those things all were a factor. This made the notion of the supply chain for people who previously had not given it, much thought, how recycling does affect that supply chain. Well, now everybody was thinking about it now. And we also saw how our response to China's new policies made us the industry more resilient. So last piece is, keep in mind when COVID started, there was a lot of discussion and debate on whether a recycling facility or MRFs, material recovery facilities, should be considered an essential business or not. And that was kind of scary time for us, right, Henry? Look at Henry out there. We thought at one point that we were going to need to shut down, but thankfully, our lawmakers quickly realized that if we don't have recycling plants running and operating and generating this material, those shelves are going to remain empty. So thankfully that was done and done rather quickly. So a little long-winded, Carissa, but that's my 2 cents on the current state of the commodity markets.
Well, thank you. And Henry?
There you go. I should be off mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So good evening, everyone. And my name is Henry Angelini. I'm the Senior Operations Manager for Waste Management. I'm new to Pennsylvania. I love your state and now a proud resident here, having been born and raised in New Jersey. I've been with Waste Management 15 years and oversee a couple of the MRFs in the area, one in Philadelphia and one in Northampton, a little further north of us. We process respectively 12,000 tons a month in Philadelphia, and in Northampton we process another 5,000. Bill did a great, and by the way, thank you very much for having us. We're extremely excited to obviously be able to speak to this group. Extremely excited about your interest, taking time out at 6 p.m. in the afternoon, in the evening on a Wednesday to do so. Obviously, further confirms that, right? So Bill did a great job in explaining where markets were and they are. I wanted to speak to you briefly and at different intervals about our operation and the impact the quality of the material has on what we process. But prior to doing so, just to give you a little bit more perspective on the volume that's generated and what we receive and process, specifically during this whole COVID pandemic, correct? Obviously, everyone's been affected beyond proportions that anybody could have imagined. We did see a shift in material that we would have otherwise received from a commercial perspective when things shut down in the beginning, in late spring, early summer. And to Bill's point, there actually were collection issues during quarantine and at the height of the pandemic. And it appears obviously it's repeating itself now, but there were collection issues where in certain areas, haulers were unable to, because of quarantining reasons and those affected, they weren't able to collect your curbside recyclables. So what we lost from a commercial perspective because of all of the businesses that had shut down essentially, we also had a gap in receiving residential material. Luckily and fortunately for us as processors and as essential workers that were providing services or materials to, once again, create new material, right, that would allow e-commerce to continue to thrive during this era. You know, we had the haulers. They again innovated and found ways to get through this and collect. And we've seen a big shift, or we realized a big shift in the amount of residential material we receive. So a lot of the big box stores that would have provided us larger containers, such as refrigerator boxes and et cetera, you know, we were receiving, and we are receiving a lot more of the smaller Amazon packaging, as you can imagine. Everyone's buying stuff from home. The amount of, you know, beverage containers amongst other items are continuing to deliver into the facility at a great rate, which allows us to recover. But along with that comes other items, and we'll speak to quality in a moment, and you know, speak to Wishcycling in a little bit. But along with that comes other items that are detrimental to processing. And you know, with those Amazon packages comes the styrofoam, and comes the plastic film that things are wrapped in or bagged in. You know, and so one would put all of that material in a box and put it in the recycling bin, but there are items out there that we really shouldn't be recycling or putting in with conventional recyclables because they cause issues at our processing facilities. So, you know, we'll elaborate a little further on that. But, you know, fortunately for us, we're at a point where we're, you know, markets and the inbound stream of materials has been fairly consistent. And when I mentioned we processed 12,000 tons a month, in July, August, we were at a point where we're only processing 5,000 tons. And that again was because of the effect that COVID's had on recycling and the amount of material that we're able to collect and deliver into our facility. We're back to 12,000 tons a month. And again, you know, we have about 80 people at our facility, coupled with the technology that we have to process it. Fortunately for that, you know, for us, you know, all of them are currently employed, and we're doing the best we can with the material that we're receiving. But quality restrictions, as mentioned, the mills, the quality expectations that we provide, they're all still there. We need to make sure that we're doing our best to provide them a product, irrespective of pricing. There's, at the end of the day, they're also generating a product with what we provide them. And quality will provide imperfections in packaging. And as you know, we essentially eat with our eyes when we bring something home. And so that packaging needs to be, you know, to the manufacturer's spec. So that being said, Adrian, or you know, I'll turn it over to you so we can discuss the Wishcycling. Again, thank you very much.
Sure.
No, thank you, Henry. You did a perfect segue into what I'm going to be speaking on, and that's contamination. That plastic and styrofoam that comes in the cardboard corrugated boxes, that is considered contamination. And a lot of people don't see that usually, or don't put those two together. They usually think food or something like diapers and other trash. But so it's just out of the convenience of the curbside bin. So contamination as a whole are the non-recyclable materials to be aware of as responsible recyclers. Contamination increases the cost of processing recyclables and requires double handling, along with increasing cost of processing recyclables, and requires labor costs at the sorting facility. Something as small as giving a quick rinse to food cans and glass bottles while avoiding food and grease on paper and cardboard can save money down the line. So as responsible recyclers, we definitely want to check with our local recyclers or waste hauler about the list of materials they can take, more specifically the number of plastics they accept. But that kind of leads into putting any random plastic or item into the bin. Adrian will go over more of what we call that.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about that. Some of the things that we often find are things such as Christmas lights that I brought with me today. We find things like...
I expected them to be plugged in. Sorry to interrupt.
My husband's office here doesn't have an outlet close enough. You know, then there's cartons like these that, you know, they're plastic, and people will get these, you know, bring their groceries in, they're thinking, well, it's plastic, it must be recycling. What we call that is wishcycling. They're hoping that these items would be recyclable and recycled at the recycling facilities, because why not? It's plastic, it's metal, it's this, it's that, and maybe ideally these items can be recycled somewhere. And certainly there's markets for all types of things out there, but for the curbside bins, we don't want to see materials such as our Christmas lights or hoses or bowling balls or diapers, as you mentioned. And certainly going back to what Bill and Henry have stressed, it's about the quality of the material that's coming into your curbside, going into your curbside bin, and then ultimately coming to us, because that quality has to be, top grade so that we can get it sold and recycled again. Some of the common things that we do see in the curbside recycling bins, because people think they're plastic, are your plastic toys. We've seen bumpers, right, Henry? We've seen bumpers come in. We've seen car seats. We've seen things that are out there. And Robert joined me last year, to our Northampton MRF and saw firsthand how crews are. I'm sorry, I don't know.
This is a Zoom meeting.
Crews, you have to see the crews actually pull things out manually, and most people don't realize that the paper that they put in their bins and the cardboard and stuff, if it's tangled up in any sort of some people like to tie it up, that becomes contamination, as you're referencing, Carissa. And certainly plastic bags, when it's, people will put their paper in the plastic bag and they say, well, it's all recyclable, isn't it? Well, no, it's not. So certainly wishcycling is something that we want to educate folks on. Carissa's going to pull up a PowerPoint. Hopefully it'll show us.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
And really, what I wanted to kind of hit on too with this is all these items that you're going to be hearing about today that maybe you've been putting in the curbside bin, or thinking about, hey, it's plastic or it's metal or it's this, our website, wm.com/recycle-right, as well as earth911.com also has some great resources and lists of things that are common. They're pretty general for all municipalities, but again, as Carissa said, definitely check back in with your hauler to make sure that they're items that they can collect. Oftentimes they're coming to facilities like Monroe Waste Authority or waste management facilities, or even some of our competitors, and we all kind of are along the same lines of the things that we can accept, and that's really market driven, as Bill and Henry have alluded to. Throw it back to you. So Henry, I was going to actually ask you, maybe you can stress some of the other things that you get and what you're seeing at the facility, that how it costs us money and what you have to do to implement the best management practices to keep the line moving.
Okay, thank you again. So to provide some more perspective, I did mention we have about 80 people that work at one of our facilities. We're process 12,000 tons. We have the ability to process 50 tons per hour, which put it in to help you kind of identify what 50 tons of recyclables would appear as, or what it is your residential truck, as it collects at the curb, maxed out with recyclables is probably 5 tons. So we process 10 loaded packers an hour of material. That's a lot of material. The average township, based on the household, and you're looking at maybe 100 tons per month. So we can process 50 tons of that in an hour. But in order for us to do that, we have the automation, and we do have personnel that act as QC, or quality control. And that automation includes several pieces of equipment that use stars. They're actual rubber stars that help separate fiber from bottles and cans. We have optical sorters that differentiate between different grades of plastics. There's other equipment there that I won't bore you with, but all of that equipment, for it to process properly, needs to avoid what we call tangables. So your plastic bags, the lighting that was mentioned now for Christmas, that we see a lot of during Christmas. We have pools that will get pool liner because it's a plastic grade in the summer. We'll also receive different product containers such as algicides or chlorine holding containers in the summer or in the spring that essentially can lead to a fire if mixed together and not having been emptied properly or cleaned properly. Batteries, there's a comment here about Lowe's and the lighting. All those commodities or products might be recyclable, right? You might be able to recycle them given the opportunity with the proper processor. But we're looking for bottle grade material, residential material, cardboard and fiber as such. Batteries are not something we can process. And, with batteries, there's the risk of fire. We had a large fire at one of our facilities back in January where we took a couple of weeks to recover from. The other thing that we see that I think is something that you should all know, and that we see much of, but regardless, is the risk. Is syringes. For maintenance medication, we put syringes into tied containers, and sometimes that tied container miraculously it ends up in the recycling bin. And some folk think it miraculously disappears, but it ends up in our sort systems. And as such, we have all our operators using specific gloves to prevent syringes because that could be OSHA recordable. And it's in a life-changing event, quite honestly, if contracting hepatitis or something to that effect. But we have wearing specific gloves and sleeves to help protect them as part of their PPE. And so the tangibles that I mentioned earlier, I did get off a little subject there. Get off subject a little bit with the syringes, but back to the tangibles. What happens is they wrap on shafts, and as such, what we're processing, we stop every 4 to 5 hours to clean those shafts off because while they wrap, they start to cause issues with the quality of material because the spacing between these shafts is intentional to allow us to separate different grades of material. What occurs is a risk of fire. Friction occurs. We put people on a sort system, obviously, with fall protection in place, but they're trying to clean out these shafts of material that wrapped, and they're using, we have to use linoleum knives. You can't use any kind of grinding equipment because a spark at a recycling facility with paper is obviously not a good mix. So we have people, using linoleum knives with proper protection, but there's also a risk of injury. It costs us downtime, and as such, we incur additional costs for that downtime. And, processing costs over the last few years have multiplied. We've doubled our processing costs because number one, we need to make sure we're providing a good quality product. Number two, we need to make sure we're handling it safely, and we're also eliminating the contaminants that are in this material that add additional labor and processing time as such. So I hope Adrian, I did.
Definitely, and I would add, not for a WM plug here, but just there are programs out there that most folks aren't aware that you can recycle from home. We have a program called Lamp Tracker, and we actually offer boxes that you can, essentially they're boxes with postage on them that you can buy, or they come in big gallon containers that can be sent to your house to put your batteries in and then send it off to a designated facility that's, comes with a label and everything. So I know we're not the only ones out there, implementing those things. Different townships have different programs. In Monroe County, I know Chestnut Hill Township does a lot of recycling, in conjunction with Waste Authority. So definitely look into those things before you just throw it away. I know technically the motto often is, if you aren't sure, you should just throw it out, but certainly keep it out of the recycling bin. And because batteries are that tricky thing, they can spark anything, unfortunately. So and again, we have lots of website information available for that, and I think you guys have a collection up at your facility too, right, Krista?
Yes, we do. You can check out the wasteauthority.com. We take tires, electronics. We definitely advocate for any alternative method other than the landfill, such as our composting classes, and we're looking into recycling cigarette butts. So there's some moves going on about refreshing these alternative methods.
Definitely. Yeah, and some of the other things I wanted to touch on, before we get into some of the basic basic stuff. But, you know, I often get a lot of questions about what items can go in the recycling bin. And I'm sure like you and the most of us that are on here, you know I have friends that might be on here that recycle their cereal boxes, but also throw their plastic cereal bags in with those. And, you know, because it's plastic, again, referencing the Wishcycling piece, don't do that. But, you know, K-cups, this question keeps coming up to me. I don't know if you guys can see it. Folgers, for instance, for this example, the box that I got says that the K-cups are recyclable. And from what I can tell you, they might be, but we don't want them. They're not the same grade plastics. And another one that we want to talk about too are these types of containers. Our clamshells, your strawberry, your fruit containers. Again, they might still have that recycling arrow on them and the numbers that we're looking for, but typically they're not what we're looking for. And I'm sure Henry could go on about all of that, but what we also don't want to see is shredded paper. Anything smaller than 2 inches, we usually don't want to see. So keep the paper whole and dry. And Bill, I'm sure you have a couple recycling rules that you can share with our group here tonight as they prepare, you know, putting out their recycling out to the curb either later this week or next week.
Yeah, I think really, Adrian, really what the rules that we need to apply is we need to make it just simple for our customers, whether they're commercial or residential customers, and we need to make it standardized. I think there's a lot of confusion out there. I think, you know, recycling rules can vary between municipality to municipality. They vary between states. I think we've gotten a lot better than that better than we were, but I think there's still a lot of work to do to make it perfect. So, I mean, just the plastics alone, you got 1 through 7 plastics. And I know, you know, from the feedback I've gotten from various groups is, what the heck are all these plastics, right? And when you really look at it, when you look at recycling, right, whether it's going to be a dual stream or single stream, it's really kind of simple if you just stuck to the basic rules. First one being, if it's fiber and you could tear it, that's good, right? So if it's a newspaper, junk mail, office paper, cardboard, any of those cereal box without the plastic liner, those are all items that work great, right? And then when you look at the commingled side, whether you're going to mix it with single stream or just, you know, pick it up or collect it by itself, it's really bottles and cans. And when you look at bottles and cans, I guess the confusing part, and I have my little cheat sheet here, is, you know, ones obviously is your water bottle, your PET water bottle. Your twos is you have your natural, which is your plastic, like translucent milk jug. And then your pigmented, which is your laundry detergent bottle, your whisk, your Tide. The other one is your fives, really, which is all your butter tubs, your margarine tubs, your yogurt tubs. Those are the 3 that are really important to us. But the thing is that's, you know, interesting. If you looked at the other grades that are included in this plastic list, first of all, number 3 is PVC. And yes, there's some food containers made out of PVC. It's really undesirable, but if we get some of it, it's not a big deal. I think of PVC as more of being like, you know, PVC piping, right, for plumbing. The other one, the number 4, if you really think about it, well, that's not a bottle or can. That's LDPE. So that's a low density polyethylene, which is really just a film or a bag. And we all know that shouldn't go in due to 1 through 7s. Number 5 we mentioned is good. A 6 is polystyrene or your styrofoam coffee cup. I think we all know that they should be left out as well. And then finally 7. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. I check my kitchen all the time. I don't think I've ever seen a 7 on the bottom of a bottle. It says here polycarbonate baby bottles. My kids are 34 and 32, so I haven't seen any baby bottles in a while. But I guess, just summarize for me, keep it simple, better outreach, better education, everybody working together, and standardize it so we're all doing the same thing. That's what I would suggest.
I would agree. Keeping it free of plastic bags, free of food waste, and really keeping it dry. Anything else on that? I guess that's really what we want to see, and certainly reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So all containers, glass, it's a negative value grade, right, Henry? But it's still in the county plan, so it is recyclable. Certainly aluminum cans, very good value. Tin cans, good, decent value. And even like HD, which I mentioned earlier, HD Natural, your milk jugs, it's actually worth more than aluminum right now. So there's a lot of good components out there. If we just kept those components, kept them clean without all the other stuff, boy, it'd be a home run for the processors and our customers.
Well, hopefully tonight we're going to get closer to that and working together and informing our communities. And I know I've seen a couple of questions come in or comments. And Carissa, since you're kind of at the helm of the thing here, maybe you're able to see them better than I can. But
so we got a good tip that Lowe's will take Christmas lights for recycling through December 25th. Looks like that's a good tip for us. And then the next question is, what plastics can we recycle curbside and at waste management? Which is the same thing. I know the Waste Authority takes 1 and 2 specifically. I know, Adrian, you mentioned what you don't take, which is clamshells and the K-cups. Do you take any numbers specifically? I know Bill mentioned 1, 2, and 5. Go ahead.
So and if it's maybe it might be somebody, a local resident too. So at the landfills, we have recycling drop-offs, and we can collect cardboard and then plastics 1 through 7 there. It's usually all specific and designated in front of those containers or behind those containers, wherever they have it located. And Henry or Bill, please feel free to jump in if there's anything else. But to my knowledge, it's pretty specific to cardboard. They tend to keep separate just for keeping things clean. And then they have the rest is our single stream commingled.
All right. And what about black plastics? I know that's something that comes up. At the authority, we don't take it at our sites.
Bounce that to Henry or Bill on that one.
All right.
I think black plastics are typically PVC grade, and that's the problem. It could be PET, but it could be PVC, and that's where we run into the problems. Sometimes they're not well marked, so you're not sure if it's a number 1 or a number 3 grade. Is that right, Henry?
That's correct. So for anything that's really not something that we're saying that we would process 1, 2, and 5, right? And there are other plastic grades that Bill mentioned. They may have a purpose or to be repurposed at a specific processor, but they have to be collected in bulk grade, and that's not something that we do, right? So to the Christmas lights, Lowe's will take Christmas lights if you bring it to them, and that's what you're providing them for separated Christmas lights. When they end up in our stream of material, we don't have the ability to collect them, and it's just to become detrimental to the process.
All right.
The plastics, we don't have the ability to collect them. There's not enough of, and the technology we have doesn't allow us to collect it. There's the potential for the PVC, which has chloride in it, and there's health, risks associated with processing that material. And so the processors that would accept that material, they're far and few apart. And at the moment, again, the area of focus would be on materials that are more reusable, such as the PET, for carpeting. For PET now, some of our shirts and sweaters are made of plastics, right? With clothing, the textile garments. So some of those other grades of plastics, there's very few of, and there's not a market for them to be repurposed or reused. And they essentially end up, even though we receive them through our process, they end up in the residue. And again, that adds cost to your recycling program, right? Just like the tangibles do because of the downtime that are incurred. So.
And Henry, one of the things that I've learned over my years with waste, 15, hard to believe that I've been here 15, but you know, the reason why, you know, even if this clamshell container has a 1 or a 5 or a 3, something that we would typically collect, you know, from what I've learned, this isn't necessarily a plastic that melts the same way as, say, the same number ones as a plastic that our plastic bottles come. Is that accurate?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Just like the rigid plastic, sorry, there's injection molded. There are different, the density of the plastics can cause a difference or create a difference in which the way they're reprocessed. And again, that's what will create the imperfection in the bottle once it's packaged again or formed. You may find where it looks like there's a tear in the plastic because there's a thicker type material in there, and as such, when it's being formed, it creates that imperfection. But the same with glass. You know, we accept glass, and the glass processors are more than willing to accept it. But then there's different types of you know, heat treated that melt at different temperatures, and they create the same issues. The Pyrex glasses that we use, it's designed to tolerate heat, but that then creates a difference between the average type of glass that you would receive in a beverage bottle, which is why we focus on bottle grade beverage material.
Thank you.
All right, that makes sense. All right, the next question is, what about plastic packaging tape on boxes? I know with the Waste Authority, we consider that contamination, and the very little that we deal with. Preferably, we would ask that you clean it up and just take it off and put it in the garbage can. Does it inhibit waste management system or process?
Yeah, we always tell folks too that we, you know, tape it off, but Henry's the one that would see that the most if and how it clogs up the system. There's a whole lot of tape coming in, but I always advise to take it off and flatten the box.
Flatten the box, clean it up of tape. Great.
I don't agree. I think for number 11 cardboard, I think it's the mills expect it.
Okay.
You know, a certain degree of tape. If it was maybe number 12 or double sorted cardboard, they may be a little more pickier, but I don't think we need to ask residents to remove tape from a cardboard box.
Okay.
See, that's where it's a little different each place.
And it's the habit of cleaning up the recycling before you put it in the bin too, which always helps our processes, such as giving a little rinse to the detergent and soap bottles before putting it in the recycling bin. Thank you for your question, Trudy Ann. Yeah, just that goes a long way in the contamination aspect. So we just ask that you clean it up before putting it in the bin.
Yeah, quick rinse is really what we want. And just get back to the cardboard with the tape. Think about it when it goes to the mill, right? It goes into a huge pulper, and there's a lot of hot water, and it's going to break down that cardboard box and turn it into pulp to make a new box. All of the tapes, it basically floats to the top of the pulper, which is a huge vat, and they have skimmers that actually just swipe it off.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at Henry's son behind him.
You
All
know,
right.
Sorry, Bill. He just came back from jiu-jitsu. Wanted to say hello.
Yeah, so the mills have a very easy process to remove items like that.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. I was always taught just take it off, make it easier.
yeah,
but
right, clean it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good because it gets people, and I'm sorry, Adrian, it gets people to think about what happens after they put it into the bin, which brings us back to the Wishcycling. If you know that's how it's going to be processed, you're definitely putting it into the bin. So it's good to put that in some light.
Yeah, if I could add, Bill brings up a good point. The cardboard processors, the plastic processors, they've adapted, right? Packaging has changed. They realize that there's some film inherently in material. There may be labels on bottles, right? They understand that. That's not going to change. And so they've adapted and they have equipment to separate by grade, by bath, whether it's floating material on density or melting it at different temperatures, right? Like an aluminum can, you can, it'll melt at a certain temperature. Meanwhile, the paint has come off it beforehand, right? But the important part is that we eliminate what we can, such as the organic component. Right? I think that's very important to point out when you talk about cleaning stuff out. Leaving any kind of organic food, leftover pizza in boxes, anything that may, it's traceable, as it's left in the material, and we sort it. And if we don't catch it or remove it beforehand, and a box of fish ends up in a container and ends up overseas 90 days from now, and you open that container, they're going to be in for a rude surprise, right? And as such, it can lead to quality concerns and/or rejected loads. The other part is, as Bill mentioned, with the OCC or other grades of material, they understand that there's other material, there's other contamination, and there's a cost, so to speak, of doing business, right? So they pay for material based on the quality, and the more contaminants and other things that they're receiving that they didn't pay for affect who you can market your material to. And if you're not cleaning up your material well enough as a provider, as a generator, then you may be blacklisted from a specific miller or processor. So again, which is why it's important, we try to educate as many people as possible so that we're receiving clean material, so that at the end of the day, we provide clean material back to mills or processors.
Henry, one of the big questions that we get, I'm sure Carissa does too, is caps on plastic bottles or caps off plastic bottles?
We welcome caps on bottles. So misnomer, and years ago, the equipment might not have been able to withstand, or the bottle itself might not have been able to compress to the point where we can market, again, everything's really weight and volume and movement, right? But the balers that we have now, if you have a PET bottle that has a cap on it, we densify to the point where we can market the material, and then the processors, back to adapting to what comes in the material, they then shred this plastic, and if it's a different grade of the plastic the bottle is, then you can use a water bath. The material will float because of its density, and they separate it. And then there's a value for the cap, and there's a value for the PET bottle or the HD bottle.
Fantastic.
I'm leaving the material in there, it doesn't get lost. It's actually better that you keep the cap on, because we can recover it as such, as with that process. Shredded paper is recyclable. It's recyclable, right? We love paper. When it's shredded, because of our process, we size material, and that's how we separate it. Mm-hmm. Shredded paper makes its way in with glass, because we break glass to separate it from the rest of the material. If you think about it, it's 1/2 inch or smaller. Shredded paper at that size ends up in the glass and creates a contaminant in glass, which is why we don't want shredded paper. However, provide us bulk grades of shredded paper out of a shredding truck, and that material itself can be baled on its own without having been processed through a plant that has the opportunity for the material to fall through and end up in glass. And there's a value to it. It's recovered, it's reprocessed.
And I think that's an important message. Again, going back to, well, it's plastic, it's paper, it's this or that. Most people think that just because it can go in the bin. There's definitely outlets for that bulk content, but just not in the curbside bin, which we are all doing every week. So, tonight we really wanted to focus on what goes in those bins and what shouldn't go in those bins. And I certainly thank you guys for joining and answering those questions, because I think it's super important. So, did we get any other questions, Carissa?
I think we covered it.
Awesome.
Oh, does the recycling that is picked up from our homes go to you?
So I would say if it's Monroe County, Northampton County, and I think Don Lucy was on here. I think most of the local, to us here for Carissa and I, does go to Northampton's recycling facility. And I'm not sure if any of it's actually coming up to your facility unless they're dropping it off specifically, right, Carissa?
I was gonna say no. I think we get a lot of like county waste and smaller haulers here.
Again, Henry or Bill might know that a little bit more specific, but I believe it's presidentially picked up. It's coming to our Northampton facility.
Yeah, I'll defer to Bill about Monroe County, but we received box, as you mentioned, some Northampton County material, but I'm not sure about Monroe. I don't know if Bill could answer that better than I.
Yeah, yeah, it goes to a variety of different places based on, value that's being offered. So we do get it on occasion. We don't get it all the time. It can go to other processors.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, if Grand Central Hauling's picking up, and it's going to our facility in Northampton.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful.
All right, and we thank you for the question, Lynn. And we covered Roxanne's questions about the clamshells. Oh, Lynn has a follow-up question to that. Does Northampton have the same rules? So they go by the same rules that you guys have.
Yep, definitely. And we have a couple links on the Grand Central Landfill website that they can, kind of shortcut to and find that information.
Yeah, let me share the resources one more time before we end here. And that way we can get our list straight.
And definitely, in the future too, if anybody has questions on the call, they can reach out to myself, Carissa.
Absolutely.
I don't have the answer. I will get it from Henry or Bill or any number of my colleagues, because I don't know everything. Those guys do. But I do appreciate, again, everyone joining us tonight, and I hope you found it very informational. Oh, looks like we got another one. Is there any plan to install optical sorters at Northampton? I don't know that answer. That would be Henry.
If the question is the Northampton recycling facility, we do have optical sorting equipment. It may be a different manufacturer than what we have at the Philadelphia facility, but we do have optical sorting equipment.
All right. Well, that's, kind of wraps it up for us, I believe. And Carissa, did you have anything else you wanted to add tonight?
No, I think we covered a good chunk of it. And like you said, they could always reach out to us for questions that come in the meantime. And I'm sure this is just the first time we're going to be doing this community discussion. I'll look forward to more in the future.
Definitely, us too. And thank you for having us. And thank you everyone for joining us.
That was great. Thanks
you.
very much, folks.
Thank you.
Have a
good
great
night.
evening, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.